Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started here. My name is Chris Rasmussen, and Karla's here beside me.
Hello.
And we are sometimes known as Wandering Whimsy. We travel around the country and the world whenever we can, and we photograph our journeys to hopefully spread some awareness of some interesting places that you can go. And if you slow down just a little bit, you can experience even more. So, this here is a trip that Karla and I took to Victoria about a month ago now, just before the Canadian Thanksgiving weekend. And it was a chance for us to kind of decompress as we normally like to travel right around Thanksgiving. It's a chance to celebrate the end of summer and then the start of the new season. This one was an early trip for us, of course, as anybody's flown out of the city of Regina's airport recently. It's get there early for your connecting flight somewhere else, and that was no different for this trip here. The photos won't move. Just two
There we
seconds.
go.
There we go. So again, we're going to flip through some of these photos pretty quick. We have a lot to cover here, but our journey started, of course, in Regina and then continued on to Victoria. Came in on a wet and cloudy day. Thankfully, it was a lot warmer than it was here in Saskatchewan because back here it was starting to snow as we arrived in Victoria. So we were pleased to see the greenery as we arrived into Victoria.
And the last time we'd been in Victoria was in February in 2017, I believe it was. And when we came that trip, we brought the snow with us, and they actually got a quite big dump of snow at that time. So it was nice to experience the city this time in slightly warmer weather, even though it was raining. Our first stop here was the Aquarium of the Salish Sea, which is fantastic. This is actually located in Sydney, so closer to where the airport is. One neat thing that they had done was introduce some artwork by Indigenous artists, and I always tease Chris that he's a bit of a bear, so he was able to find his counterpart here on one of the walls. This is a great place to go for visitors of every age. The last time we went, my kids were quite small and they had come with us on that journey and they were just fascinated. We spent hours and hours and hours here. I don't like jellyfish very much, but I am quite interested in looking at them. And I think if you go one more picture, there's me making my face because I've got a love-hate relationship with them. They're beautiful, but I don't ever want to be in any water where they could possibly touch me. But speaking of touching, they have a really cool touch tank at the back end of the aquarium here. So again, visitors of any age, as long as you wash your hands, you're welcome to go and check out what's in this little aquarium. And there's anemone and there's some flounders and things like that. Very cool stuff. And then this is the back entrance of the aquarium area. They've got some lovely sculptures and artwork there, and it looks right onto the ocean. So that's kind of the view behind the aquarium. So it's really a neat location because you're inside, you're seeing all of the things that live in the bays and whatnot there. And then you can go outside and explore this little park area just behind. So it was kind of showering on and off, and we did just kind of luck out a little bit here. The cormorants up on the posts were really neat to see. I just missed taking a picture of one with its wings wide open having a stretch, so I was just a little bit behind there. But on our first trip, when we came out this way with the kids, they filled their pockets with rocks right away. And this was something we had also experienced on our first trip was these lovely seals. That one was sleeping and then it was joined shortly by a friend. So we spent a few minutes here watching them. One was bobbing and one was just kind of hanging out and fishing around. So
If you do get a chance to fly out to Victoria, you're going to land in the Sydney area because that's where the airport is. Don't bypass Sydney or the rest of the island as you make your way down to Victoria. There's a lot of really interesting areas. Again, as I said, just slow down a little bit and take your time to explore. There is a tremendous amount of not only nature, but interesting neighborhoods, um, tourist areas that you can go to check a number of things out. And so before we took off from Sydney to check out the rest of the island, we stopped in at the Surly Mermaid, a nice little restaurant that's right beside the yacht club. Reasonable prices, good food, good beer, great staff. Wasn't a day for sitting outside, so we sat inside, but tremendous experience there as we got to have some mussels and some tasty local beers for lunch.
and we do enjoy seafood quite a bit, which leads us to this picture here. I don't know if anyone recognizes this. It's kind of a bit of a curious sign until you kind of look a little bit further. From Sydney, we went to the Bouchard Gardens, and because their parking lot is so massive, they have all the different lots labeled with pictures of different animals. So we were in the crab lot there, which I thought was kind of cool because we both love seafood and we just come from eating a whole bunch.
For me, this was my first experience at the gardens here, and I wasn't really sure what to expect other than it was a large garden that was built in an interesting place a long time ago. So, of course, I'm in for any excursion like this, and to my surprise, this was quite possibly one of the loveliest gardens that I've ever been to, and we've been to quite a few around the world. But this one here was, I think, surprising to me because of the way that it was organized. If you could think Disneyland, but with plants, this was Bouchard Gardens. The way that it was set up, the way that you went through, just the top-notch caliber of how things were planted on display and what they offered visitors. It was truly an extraordinary experience, even with the rain, but that's what umbrellas are for. And this is one of their inside areas where they keep some of their tropical plants. You can look through the window and you can get an experience of what the inside is.
And a lot of that indoor space is available for rentals and whatnot too. And like Chris said, it's very well run, very well organized. Their traffic flow for pedestrians is wonderful. And I think the thing that impressed me the most was how accessible it was. So for anyone with mobility challenges, whether you're in a wheelchair, you have a cane or a walker, it's very easy to move from place to place. I mean, other than the sheer size of this, it's many, many acres, but you're able to walk just about anywhere in this particular property. So if you've not been to Bouchard Gardens and are not familiar with it, this is the sunken garden. And the story goes the Bouchard family were a very well-to-do family. They had a concrete business in the area, and this was one of the former quarries that they used when they were in that business actively. After it had been depleted, Mrs. Bouchard decided to do some landscaping, and she brought in top-notch gardeners from all around the world to help her in this planning, but she did a lot of the designing herself. So this is a really gorgeous place.
As you walked around, all you heard were the oohs and ahs for the first time visitors as they got to check out the landscape. Because as you can see from the kiosk here, it was just a quarry and it was changed into that absolutely amazing garden at the bottom. And as you walk through, it's quite easy to get lost because there's paths and twists and turns and little quiet gardens and other things you can take a look at. So plan to be there longer than you anticipate and don't go by what the website says. It says the visit should be about an hour and a half to 2 hours. We were there for a solid 4. And it also helps that it's quite photogenic.
We did stop and smell the flowers.
So as you go through, there's different themes for each of the areas. There's, of course, the sunken garden, and there's Japanese gardens. There's the rose garden. There's truly an amazing display.
This was one of my highlights here. I'm a sucker for a carousel, and whenever we travel, we seem to have been very fortunate in finding one. And I had read about this in advance, so I was prepared. And there's a beautiful, beautiful carousel house in the back part of the gardens here. It is a modern carousel. It's not an old one, but it's been done very sympathetically to traditional menagerie style. So it had more than just horses. So I ended up choosing an ostrich, and Chris had a panda bear. And I think it was an extra, was it $2 or $5 at this one?
I think it was only $2 per person.
Yeah, and then all of the revenue from the rides here go to a children's charity. So just beautiful and very popular amongst the visitors too.
And quite fast. It was faster than I expected it to be. And then it was decorated with some marionettes and different artwork around the outside. But it was a nice place to get out of the rain, and we probably would have gone in even if it was a sunny day.
This is just from the other side here. They've got a wonderful old tractor with some landscaping around it.
We're going to cruise through these pictures a little bit quicker now because it was such an amazing experience. We had quite a few photos from this. It was hard to pick.
This building here actually contains a pipe organ, and there's a lawn just across from it where they have summertime concerts. And so this is something weren't able to hear it and see it in person this time, but I understand it's still used and it's quite the thing.
Those windows on the top open up to allow the sound to come out onto the lawn that's in front of it. So a way to keep the organ safe, and then you can just sit out on the lawn and enjoy.
This is a favorite tree of mine. I first saw one in San Francisco. It's called a monkey puzzle tree, and it's named because every single square inch of this tree is covered in spikes. So it's got very, I guess you call them needles. They're very thick, and it gets its name because even a monkey couldn't figure out how to climb this tree without getting stabbed.
As you can see, the garden itself is just immaculate. They must have an army of people that work there in the after hours because when we were there, we only saw maybe a half a dozen people, maybe a dozen total working on little individual projects. But there isn't one thing that's out of place. Everything is balanced. Some absolutely amazing little pockets like this one here. If you're going along too fast, you'll miss some of these pockets.
We were also fortunate we went on a Saturday, but we were there early in the day, so it wasn't super busy, as you can see. There were still a lot of people there, but because of the sheer size of the property, it's easy to spread out. And then Chris had mentioned umbrellas. They actually have umbrella stations throughout the park here where you can just pick up an umbrella, use it while you need it, and then leave it at another spot further down the road. So it's very fantastic that way. And they were constantly replanting and changing out the seasonal flowers and bulbs. I know just after we left, they were putting in their bulbs for the spring, but they were, I think, the only ones we saw that were really getting wholesalely changed out were some petunias they were planting.
As the rain started to come down a little bit harder, we headed into the Japanese garden, which is a bit more sheltered and yet at the same time uses the natural water flow through this area to accentuate the Japanese garden as you would expect. So the rainy time of the day was actually really nice to come in here. You were under cover, and yet there were other areas where you could get out of the rain. There were a couple of pagodas. And then down at the bottom of the Japanese garden, you actually leave the property and you return to what I believe is a nature reserve or a nature swatch of land that goes right down into the sea. So there's this little gap here that you're on the property and you can see out down into the bay that's there. And then this is on the outside of the property past a public road, and you can access the sea right from the bottom. So during higher tides or during higher water years, that water would back up, and this would have been before the days of the garden, back up the ravine where the Japanese garden is. It's a really interesting use of the natural landscape. And we finally had to seek shelter because the rain just got too hard at one point, but it was nice to sit there for 10, 15 minutes just listening to the rainfall.
And we were there like middle of October. I understand even just a little bit later than we were there, the colors really start to change in that particular garden. All the Japanese maples turn bright red, and we did see a hint of that, but it had just begun. This is actually Mr. Bouchart's former duck pond. He had it constructed because he was a duck fancier and his ducks used to go out here. And now it's just a lovely garden. And it leads into the Italian garden area, which is just behind the former Bouchart resident house here. But beauty as far as the eye could see, that's for sure.
Really hard to take a bad photo at a place like this because there's just so many amazing things to see. It's one thing to go through as a photographer, you're going to be there forever, but even as a guest yourself, you're just drawn to these different areas where you just stand in awe.
They had a little gelato stand just off of the Italian garden here too. We didn't get any, but a lot of other people did.
We took too long taking photographs. They were closed by the time we tried to get there.
I think this was the first time I'd seen one of those types of hedges in person. You see them in movies and on TV shows with hedge mages and whatnot. And it really was quite impressive to stand beside that and see that it's like 6 feet thick and so dense that you can't see through it. And then the last little bit of the garden here, this is just a big succulent planter. And then this is the, oh gosh, Mediterranean garden. So it was very small.
So we finally made our way to our hotel and we were staying right down in the downtown old area, just a couple of blocks up from the legislature. And it's where we wanted to be because we tend to walk a lot and explore on foot when we go on these vacations and these explorations. So we found a place right downtown and we decided to head out for supper right away because it had been a long time getting there.
Yeah, we were up since about 2 in the morning that day. So
So this is a converted old bar hotel, and we were quite surprised at how nice the rooms were.
I believe the name was the Bedford Regency, and this was the best part we hadn't anticipated. We had a view of the Inner Harbor from our room. We were on the fourth floor. I think it was a five-story building.
So lovely view every night.
And this is the little pedestrian walkway between our hotel on the left and then the Irish pub on the right. This is one of our hotel's two pubs, the Garrick's Head. It had a little bit more complete food menu, so we thought we'd go there and we had some really delicious, kind of like comfort food. Chris had the fish and chips, and I had a delicious turkey sandwich and fries.
Refueled and rejuvenated after the travel all day, we decided to head out for the night and explore the inner harbor. Uh, Another one of the lovely things about Victoria is how things are decorated for the nightlife. It's very nice to just walk around in the evening and see all the lights. Of course, the old hotel, Parliament, all of the older buildings that are in the area, they're all lit up and it creates quite the atmosphere.
And it had stopped raining, which is also a bonus. So the next morning we had some going out and about to do. So right beside our hotel is Murchie's. And if you've been to Victoria, you may know Murchie's. It's been known for many years as a premium place to get your tea. They also have a delightful little sandwich bar over here and baked goods for sale. So we did this a couple of times actually. We got lunch on this particular day, some fantastic sandwiches, some lovely teas. And we've done a little bit of shopping as well. So we've gone to the Irish linen shop. And if you've not been there, they have modern linens as well as vintage ones. But then our next stop was actually down at the Royal BC Museum. I am a huge Beatles fan. I know Chris likes them a lot too. And this is John Lennon's Rolls Royce. It was hand painted for him many years ago. I had actually seen it once before in Winnipeg, Manitoba, when it was in a small exhibit there. But this was part of a larger exhibit that had to do with how music could inspire change. And we'll get to those pictures in just a minute. But this was really cool to see that front and center right in the lobby.
This was an interesting display in their gallery that changes quite a bit. And so this was about how music can lead resistance and change. And so it went through the history of how music has changed our society, talked about politics, and all of those different items that maybe don't get the attention that they need. And so you think back to the 60s, of course, the 70s, the 80s, the social revolutions that have happened around the world, they all tend to center around music as a catalyst for delivering that message in an entertaining way to reach more people. And so that's what this display was about. And they had some pretty amazing pieces in there, including the suit from Elton John. I took a look at the suit and I don't think that I could have got one leg into it. It was so tiny.
This was a little pop-up exhibit about Asian Canadians and the role that they played in the Victoria area. And then we went into the Natural History Museum, and the mammoth is just delightful to look at. It's very cool. It's life size. And then this, I can't exactly remember how this tied into the rest of the Natural History Museum part, but it had to do with shadows. So what you can see there, it looks like little birdhouses that are all suspended by fish line. And then they were supposed to use a flashlight, but the flashlight was broken. So we just played around with our flashlights on our phones and created all these different interesting little patterns. So you can kind of see that move just a little bit there.
The museum's undergone some changes since the last time that we've been there. They've been updating some exhibits, changing exhibits, updating language and things like that. But some things are still classic because they work. And this is an area that's meant for little kids, but I'm a little kid. So the computer screen here correlates with the display that's there, and you can check out what each of the animals are on that rock. So it's an interesting way to get kids involved. Another nice thing about the museum is it's right beside the legislature, so you can get one fantastic view of a pretty amazing building. And then, of course, the Inner Harbor and the Empress across the street.
This was another temporary exhibit, and it was all about chintz fabric. And I will admit, I didn't know a lot about chintz before I saw this, and it was very interesting to go through and see historic pieces of material, the textiles, all the way up through modern ways that the chintz is still being used today. So these came from all over the world, and I think the most fascinating part was reading the panels that had been produced in India, but marketed to specific countries. So there were some that were in an English display. So what the English people favored at that time as modern fashion, the different patterns and that sort of thing. They went through, I don't know, probably half a dozen different countries in Asia as well, about how this fabric was imported and used in their various fashions of the day.
And of course, a large ship is always a fan favorite that's still there. This is a reproduction of the one that was sent out and put back together. It's an amazing piece that's in there, and of course, a look at many of the natural elements of Canada in the area. There's similar to the Sukin Ship Museum here in Moose Jaw. They've got a town set up where you can walk through and you can take a look at the different ways that life would have been.
You can go back just one slide for a second there. This was something that had been newly introduced, and it's a way to bring different voices into a museum setting. And I work at the Western Development Museum, so this is something that I was fairly familiar with, but it was really cool to see different thinking points, if you will, scattered throughout the old town here. And you put yourself in someone else's shoes. So for my experience here, consider this: would you be allowed or welcomed into a turn of the century saloon? I am a woman, so likely I would not have been welcome in that saloon. But you can also think of other underrepresented voices that would not have been welcome or even allowed at that time to come in. So it was a different way of looking at a historical exhibit for sure.
This was an area that was under construction when we went through this time. We had seen it in its full glory on our past exhibit or our past adventure to Victoria. And I was a little disappointed with what they removed and changed, but considering that it was still under construction, I'm interested to see how the totem pole room will grow into the future. They've returned some of the totem poles back to the Salish communities where they came from, where they were taken from over 100 years ago, and now some of them are being returned. So it will be a change to the exhibit, but it would be nice for them to be able to keep some of that language, some of the stories, and what happened to the Salish people and their treasures in this exhibit at some point.
This is a small version of a larger one that was there when we were last in Victoria, and it's all about language and the many different languages that are on the island itself, not to mention the whole of British Columbia. This is the Thunderbird Garden outside. It's a fairly famous place. Again, some of these totems have been repatriated to their communities, but there are still a few that are remaining here. Just behind the garden is this historic home, and it was closed for the season at that time. And then we just walk back towards downtown. This is the statue of Emily Carr, and then they've got some really cool topiaries on the other corner of the Empress lot.
And as we often do on most of our trips, we just wander and we happen to wander down to this lovely little spot, Nautical Nellies. It's a little out of the way, but not really. Be easy to walk past and not stop in, but we glad we did. We're looking for a little snack as we continued on and a drink, and we found out that they had a special, and we would be back the next day, and we'll talk a little bit about that later, but it would be a first experience for us. But the artwork that was inside was all done by the owner, and it was quite interesting to see.
I think I've got another picture coming up later from our second visit. Again, a Victoria staple, Rogers chocolates. They do sell them in other locations. This is the original one, and it's just a fantastic little candy shop.
More just of our wandering around. This is the Swan, I believe,
Yeah.
and this was kind of our haunt on our last trip. It was child friendly and they made their own root beer. So the kids absolutely love that. And of course, I love the local craft beer. So this was a place that we hung out quite a bit on our last trip.
And we were making our way towards Chinatown, and we were waiting for the lights to come on down the main street there. So we took a little bit of a detour and came across this beautiful former Masonic building. Just the architecture is pretty amazing, and then found some other really cool storefronts on the way back. There we are. The lights are on. The Chinese zodiac symbols on the crosswalk there. This is a school, and it is, I think it's been in continuous use for over 100 years. This is a really neat mural that's just down the street from that school. And some of the new artwork that hadn't been there on our last visit. And I believe the Don Me restaurant is the oldest continually operating Chinese restaurant in Victoria. It's quite a staple. Lovely little grocery stores. We popped in there and got a few treats for ourselves. The large gate was actually covered up. They're doing some restoration. If you're familiar with it, I think it's Harmonious Interest Gate, something to that degree. And this is part of Fantan Alley. Again, it wasn't all lit up just yet. We did come back another day.
This is one of our favorite areas in Victoria, and we were lucky to get to check it out on our first trip a number of years ago. What's interesting about this is it would have been a communal living area. It would have been little shops where you could get fishing hooks and nets and very specific items for anything that happened in the area. And then it was sort of abandoned. On our last trip, they were just starting renovations on this. So there were only one or two shops in here. They'd done some decorating, some planting. But coming back this time, it was a real place for nightlife. There's a couple of bars, a couple of restaurants, a pile of stores. There were some residences, I believe, on the top floors. But it's an absolutely stellar example of repurposing old areas to new areas.
Yeah, so it's called Market Square, and you have to kind of walk through a hallway between and underneath of the existing buildings there. So if you've been to the Forks in Winnipeg, that's probably the closest thing I could compare it to where they've repurposed those old buildings.
And so this is one of the bars slash restaurants that's in the area. And they've been able to go on through the night because they have an outdoor area that they've got warmed up. And so this was for me. I'm a big pinball fan, and so we found Pinhalla, which is actually in Chinatown. It's just on the I guess it'd be the northern edge of Chinatown. A little unassuming place, but as soon as you go in, it's if you grew up in the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, it was just an absolute museum of pinball and arcades. So we spent a couple of hours here, and it wasn't that expensive. They had a Halloween special on, so any of the spooky games were 2 for 1 plays. So we spent a couple of hours there. And this is the Labyrinth pinball machine with a local artist decorating the area. It was a really nice addition to an already great game.
Chris and I are big fans of the movie Labyrinth. It's an early Jim Henson film that we both watched in childhood quite a bit. So a really neat thing to try and play. And even the plunger was one of the creatures from the movie. So
But for a pinball guy like me, this place was fantastic. I wouldn't doubt for a minute they had 35-ish different pinball machines, some easy, some harder, some popular ones, some less popular machines, some classics. You see Funhouse in the diner here. These are a couple of classics that anybody who's into pinball will recognize some of these titles here, especially Funhouse and Rudy the Clown. So it was for me a really nice place to go and spend the evening, get out of the rain, and be able to play some of the games that I've never seen in person, like Champion Pub. This is a game where your actual goal of the game is to try and knock out the character that's in the middle of the table with the pinballs. I had never seen it in person before, so it was nice to get a chance to see it.
the next morning, we got up fairly early and we took a drive just outside to Esquimalt and went to Fort Rod Hill and Fiskard Lighthouse. So these are National Historic Sites. They're operated by Parks Canada. And we had visited here on our last trip, but as I said, it was quite a chilly trip the last time. So this was a nice way to see it again in a little bit warmer weather. And there had been a few changes to areas that you could or could not access from that last trip. So good to get another view on it. So this is the upper battery. It's very well concealed. It was used on and off from before the First World War, and they did repurpose it several times. There are a number of original pieces, some guns, and many of the buildings that were original to the particular property. There's a deer over there on the left side and a number of Canada geese. This is kind of one of the, I think it was the power unit. Uh, Go ahead.
This was an interesting piece of Canadian history because it was purpose built to guard the strait along with American allies on the other side of the sea. And it never saw any battle other than one day when they saw two submarines approaching. They went into overdrive. They got the guns loaded. They had their sightings, and they were just about to pull the trigger when they got a call that said, "No, don't shoot. Those are our submarines." Well, the story turns out the premier of British Columbia at the time had secretly purchased two submarines to come onto the coast of BC for protection of the Canadian land there. And he couldn't tell anybody because it went against current purchasing instructions. And of course, it was purchased the day before Canada signed on to World War II. So it's a super secret thing, so secret that even the Canadian Armed Forces didn't know they were coming in. And the battery almost blew up their own submarines. But at the last minute, they got a call saying, no, they're ours.
So we took a little bit of a detour and we saw a small flock of turkey vultures. Some of them were circling, some of them did settle for a little bit. So Chris got some pictures. And then we took a little bit of a walk down to the shore there. It was a bit windy, so the waves were up, but there was a lot of debris. There was several dead crabs of different parts of them scattered around. And then we kind of made our way back in through the forest and back to the historic site. Very, very cool trees. This is kind of a neat addition. It's disguised to look like a fisherman's hut, and it's actually a big light inside. I think I've got there. I'm not sure why that's a live picture, but it is. So made by GE.
These are submarine nets, so it's coiled wire that is then, I guess, woven into a net, just like a fisherman's net. But these would have been strung across the bay using the bells and buoys to hold them in place, and it was nearly impossible, in fact, probably impossible for the submarines to get into the bay because of these nets. And of course, as we make our way down the coast, we're making our way towards the lighthouse.
This sculpture is a newer addition as well. If you recall the news story a few years ago, there was a mother orca who had given birth to a calf and then it died very suddenly. And she carried the calf around for another, I think it was 2 weeks afterwards. An artist was so touched by this story that she created this particular piece of sculpture. So it's very, very poignant, I think. Again, hard to take a bad picture here at the lighthouse.
This time we had clear skies. The last time we were there, it was fairly cloudy, so you got some rather moody pictures. This time we got some nice, bright, sunny pictures. Of course, as we're inside the lighthouse, this would have been the staircase to get up to change the lamps or to service them.
And unfortunately, we couldn't go right to the top. This was about as far as you could go. And they had kind of an interpretive room there with several examples of different types of lamps and some interactive things for younger visitors. And then back towards the fort again. This is the lower battery, as the sign just said. You can see how fortified it was. And built into the hillside, the geese were on guard.
This is another place where you want to allow yourself some extra time. You could probably go through it quite quick, but just because of the amount of artifacts and interesting areas that you can go to, it takes us quite a bit longer than what's suggested to be able to go through. But we also slow down a little bit, as we mentioned, to check out the different areas.
There are still a few things in bloom. This is the branch of an arbutus tree. They're very cool if you've never seen one before. As they age, they kind of peel their bark off. And if you touch it, if it feels cool, it means it has had sufficient water. If it's sort of warm and dry, it's probably needing a drink. This was the entrance to the Gary Oak Grove. So they've done a lot of restoration work in this particular site here. The Gary Oak only grows, I believe, on this part of Vancouver Island. And so they've done a lot of replanting and they've put some wildflowers back in. I sent this picture to my kids. They don't want you picking up souvenirs off the beach. And they were very sad when they saw this because they're both little rock hounds. I'd had several people tell me that if I was in Victoria, I needed to go to Spinnaker's. And I thought, oh, yeah, sure, it's just another restaurant. Well, it is fantastic. The architecture is really cool. We had a great table and delicious food, wonderful staff there. This Thanksgiving Day? I think it was.
I think this was
Yeah.
Thanksgiving Sunday.
Yeah.
And so this is the view from the patio that's out front, but it wraps around, and then you get to see the strait that kind of comes in from the bay, and then right across. You can just barely make it out. You have to know where it is in this photo, but that's Fisherman's Wharf on the other side, and Parliament as well, or pardon me, the legislature.
So I had a shrimp pizza, which was a new experiment for me, and it was very good. This is a former bank, and it was the favorite place for Robert Service to go. So he is the bard in this iteration of the building. It's now a pub, and then the banker is a nod to its former days as a bank. Some of the beautiful shops. This is the other side of Market Square, so you can enter this way and go down where that pretzel picture was taken there. They had it decorated for Halloween. We decided to go back to Chinatown during the day and get some more pictures. Fantan Alley. Lots of cool little things to pop in and see. And then just a street over is Dragon Alley. So this is another historic, similar type, narrow roadway path. This is a great little store. We were looking for some souvenirs. My daughter has a special pair of chopsticks that actually broke recently, so I was able to find her a replacement there. I got some outdoor shops, more lovely sculpture work down by the water. This was kind of a back path area that took us just to the edge of the water and the newer bridge that's there. There are a lot of float planes coming and going. That was constant and very cool to watch them come in and land.
It's fun to watch them from the hotel room. I would just sit in the chair with a drink and watch the float planes come in from our great view.
And we hadn't really spent a lot of time in this particular part of the downtown on our last trip, so it was nice just to slow down a little bit. There's some fun thrift stores and gifts and souvenirs.
And so now we've gone back to Nautical Nelly's for supper. And while we were there on our first stop in for just a quick drink, we had been told that they had oysters on the half shell at if you came back during happy hour, and so there was a deal on those. We have never had raw oysters before, so we thought that it would be a great time, and we happened to catch it right at the start of oyster season. So some of the best of the season were just coming in. But here's another piece of artwork. The owner of Nautical Nessie's does the artwork on the walls. And so this was our chance to get to try some oysters for the first time.
The waitress was very kind. There's normally a minimum of 6 per order, and she gave us 2 to try to see if we like them. She was very helpful and gave us some suggestions. I guess they had 2 different kinds in at that particular time, so bottoms up. And we liked them.
And again, this goes back to what I say about slowing down when you're traveling. There's these little murals all over the place. And so this was on the side of the building to make it look like it had windows and just add some cheer and some character to this neighborhood. This was another arcade that was in the area. This was not just a pinball arcade, but an old school 80s style arcade, Quasars, and it was in the basement. And they had some fantastic different pieces of artwork around and some games that really took me back to my childhood that I enjoyed playing here in Moose Jaw Laser Illusions. So those are the arcade games. I got to play Battletoads, which is a game that I probably haven't played in 20 years.
I had never heard of it.
This is a more modern game that I hadn't seen for probably 20 years. And then their pinball collection was a little smaller, but they're associated with the Pinhalla place that we were at the night before. And so they rotate the games between the two locations. These were more modern games. So these would be from the 2000s and newer. And then that's our hotel there.
And then we found out that they had a reverse happy hour where you could get a great huge hot dog and a beer for, I think it was like $5 or something like that.
It was pretty cheap. So this was a good midnight snack for us. The next day, we decided to head down to the legislature. I had never been inside the building. I used to work at the Saskatchewan legislature in Regina before being transferred here to Moose Jaw. So I wanted to see what the inside of the building was like. So we took the scenic route down to the legislature. And I'm often asked, since being inside, how the two buildings differentiate. And I would say that on the outside, the BC legislature is somewhat grander than the Saskatchewan legislature. But once you get inside, the Saskatchewan legislature is noticeably nicer, I'll say. The ceilings here in the BC legislature seemed a little low to me. The rotunda was smaller, the grandeur was just a little bit smaller. And then we learned, as we overheard one of the tour guides telling us later, that the legislature here in BC was deemed to be inadequate and too small within, I think it was 12 years of opening, whereas the Saskatchewan legislature was overbuilt on purpose so that wouldn't happen. But this was the inside, and you can see the desks are about 6 feet apart, which happens to be the length of two swords, so that you couldn't duel each other back in the old days. The Saskatchewan legislature, of course, has much more room. I really wanted to see the library here because when I worked at the legislature in Regina, I used to take my laptop and all my notes and things like that and go work in the library at the ledge. Absolutely beautiful place, warm wood, comfortable chairs, quiet. But I wasn't able to get to the legislature here, or pardon me, the library here, because it was in an area that was added on afterwards. And you had to actually go through a security area that was meant for MLAs only. So I wasn't able to get in there. But we were able to see the rotunda that was in the front. If you held out your arms, you could probably touch the person on the other side, whereas in the Saskatchewan legislature, it's about 25 feet across. Still a marvelous piece.
Yeah, the paintings here were especially impressive. Then we decided to take a little bit of a drive, and this was something I'd seen online and was quite interested. So we had not been up the Malahat before. This is part of the Route of Totems. We didn't go much farther than this particular sign, but it was fascinating nonetheless. Some California poppies growing right beside. But this was our destination, the Malahat Skywalk, and this was quite something. Their mascot is this Sasquatch, so Chris had to get a picture with him. Again, lots of art and that sort of thing. This was fascinating too. There's one particular artist that does driftwood art, so there's many of her pieces along the trail, and lots of photo opportunities too. They just decorated for Halloween. So there we've got a puma, and there's a little bit about the artist.
This is another place. Don't believe their website. Allow yourself extra time because there's lots of little side paths here that we found out about afterwards that we were able to take a hike on. And great for the kids. There's a lot of interaction along these pathways, a lot of places to stop, a lot of fidget stations and things like that where you can do puzzles. You're always looking for this driftwood art, which is tucked in. And then all of a sudden you come out and you see this giant tower that is concentric circles going up to the top. So it's very friendly for anybody with mobility issues. If you can do the trail here, which is all paved or on risers, you could do this tower. And so you just simply go around and around and around on the outside, not the inside, the outside. And then you can come down on that tube, which is a slide. So you can walk all your way to the top and then you can come down on the slide. We did it. We did the slide twice. It was quite a bit of fun. But as you can imagine, as you go up on this platform, every time you get a little bit higher up, the views get just a little bit better. And so we took a lot of photos this day.
But just a marvel of architecture. There was a number of signs along the way that told you how it was built, and it's one of a kind, and all the awards that it's won, and that sort of thing. So this sound is quite deep. It comes in from the ocean and it goes all the way back into Goldstream Provincial Park.
So this is at the top. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of nervous people up here, and you can get even more nervous because in the middle is a giant cargo net that you can climb onto and look straight down to the bottom past the slide.
I declined to do that.
I did not, and I went and had a little adventure over there. So this is looking into the United States.
And Mount Baker in the background. No, that's not right.
Can't remember which one that is off the top of my head, but that white peak there. And here's the cargo net that you can walk across. And of course, as you can imagine, the kids were just all over this, and there's no jumping signs all over the place, but that didn't stop them. And so it was quite interesting to stand in the middle and look straight down 64 feet. It's a place to definitely take the kids or the family for the day. You can go and sit around the fire pit. There's a place here for lunch. You can have some drinks. You can enjoy. Go to the top, take the slide, have a break, do it again. It's quite the place. Like I said, places to stop all along these paths so that you could play different games. There was fidget stations, lots of different things to see and do.
And folks, you'll have to excuse me. I've got to leave for an appointment, but Chris will finish this off.
So as we keep going, you're going to see lovely pieces of nature all throughout here. And we decided to go on the way back from Malahat back to Victoria. We decided to stop at Goldstream, which is a place we had been in the past. But at this time of the year, the salmon were starting to move along Goldstream. So we got to see some expired salmon, we'll call them, on the banks as their lives and journey had come to an end. But these were some trees that had fallen down in previous storms. I believe they were there on our first trip a number of years ago, but they've now started to decompose and hollow out and make some interesting places to see. It's a small park, but it's a popular park with people in the Victoria area. You can pull in, you can go for a picnic, you can go for a short hike. But there are a lot of people there that had just taken lawn chairs and were just sitting beside the creek and reading a book. So a nice quiet place just off the highway, not too far from Victoria. And again, we'll go through these pictures here a bit quick. This was a spillway under the highway, and it's not recommended that you go through this spillway, but if you do, it connects you to the other side of the park. You're actually encouraged to go back to the highway and go to the other parking lot, but there's a lot of folks that park at this spot at Goldstream and just cross under the spillway. This during the spring would, of course, be full of water. This was at their interpretive center, and they have a sand pit here that's got a 3D projector that's on it. And so as you move the sand, it recalibrates where the water would flow. And so it's great for little kids to be able to see the impact of maybe overforestation or human impact on the mountains. But of course, for a giant child like myself, I can't hesitate to not play in it. So, as Karla said earlier, that sound that you saw when we were at the Malahat Skywalk, all of the water comes all the way back inland, and this is actually where it ends. So, you can imagine during high water years or during high tide, the water here would be quite different than it is right now. In fact, the time that we went before, this part was underwater because it was starting to melt in the spring. So, this time we got to go down a little bit closer. And we think that we saw some salmon that were in here scooting about trying to get some food as they were going out. So again, here's the interpretive center and then our walk back. And then there's one of the fishies, and I got a sticker. So we were getting peckish at this point, so we decided to go to Fisherman's Wharf. The last time we were here, Fisherman's Wharf was closed for the season. We were a little bit just too early for it, so we decided to go this time and check out some of the boathouses that were there and the restaurants that are in the inner harbor. Some lovely, lovely places here. We learned afterwards they go for about a $500,000 a piece. But with a view like that, it's hard to argue with living there in the inner harbor. The houses themselves, of course, a tourist attraction. They're all very, very nicely done, very well kept. Your footprint is very small, so you will often see many of them that are just sheer glass or will have multiple different patios on them. The water taxi will bring you over from Victoria proper over to the harbor here. And then they've got, I think, about a dozen different restaurants there, so you can get whatever you want. Down at the other end of the harbor is the actual industrial area where they still do have boats that go out for fishing. A couple of were for sale when we were there. And then we decided to have some supper. We had a seafood stew and quite enjoyed the evening. We decided to go to the Irish pub later in the day to have a proper meal. And this, if I remember correctly, used to be a bank as well. So it was a bank first and then converted to an Irish pub as kind of the banking in this area moved to more modern buildings. A lovely little place with a permanent stage. And then we decided to have the seafood platter for supper after being so impressed with the oysters earlier in our trip. Oysters and shrimp, and there were some mussels. And then it was like a poke bowl, which is just sliced tuna marinated, but there was no salad part of it. It was actually like a dip, and you put it on the rice crisps, and it was quite tasty. And I think, unless the computer is acting up, that is the end of our journey. So thank you again for coming out, Chris and Karla Rasmussen. Again, we are known as Wandering Whimsy online, and we do enjoy helping if you are trying to plan a trip of some sort to an area that you haven't been before. You can find us on social media, especially on Facebook. Please don't hesitate to shoot us a message. You can find our photo albums on there if you want an idea of maybe a place that you're going. We've got a lot of different albums on there, and please feel free to go through and check things out so you can do a little scouting before you go on your trip. But don't hesitate to send us a message either if you've got a question about an area that maybe we've been to, or you're nervous about going to a new area that you've never been before. That's one thing that we enjoy the most is going somewhere we've never been before and to naturally be shocked and intrigued by what we find there. And so we found some tips and tricks on how to travel, one, safely, two, economically, and three, for the best enjoyment. So please don't hesitate to reach out, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation today.